There's many times he would come up. He's like, we just got another deal. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And I would go off and do what I had to do. Now, I didn't realize that he hated that. He felt like, I didn't care because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what that meant because there wasn't that communication of, here's what it means.
Are you a real estate investor looking to break into the multifamily investing space? Have you heard of MFIN Con happening in Charlotte, North Carolina, June 23rd through the 25th? The Multifamily Investor Nation Convention is a place to learn from over 60 plus high-level apartment investors and also to network with over 700 investors. If that's not enough for you, Shaquille O'Neal, Barbara Corcoran, and Jocko Willink will be live and in person speaking at this event. Be sure to secure your tickets to this live in-person event as the tickets are going fast. You can even upgrade your ticket to the VIP to have the opportunity to rub shoulders with these high-level speakers, including myself. After their session, Jocko Willink will also be attending the VIP party on Friday night at the event. So go to mfincon.com to find out more details. There's also sponsorship opportunities available too. For details for this event and to purchase tickets, visit mfincon.com. Use promo code LIFEBRIDGE to get $200 off your tickets. That's mfincon.com. I'm excited about our guest today. We are going to discuss something that's not talked about often enough. As entrepreneurs, as business owners, as people who are very driven, we don't talk about what happens at home enough. We don't talk about our spouse enough and the support that we need from them and that we need to be offering to them as well as we pursue our entrepreneurial journey, right? Our businesses, those things. Man, we can be so driven in our business and just let the ball down or let it drop at home, right? And man, it is just not worth it at that point. It is not worth it. You're going to hear me say this in the show, but I'm willing to give it all up if it, and work at McDonald's, if it means, my family, right? If it means us staying together and my wife knowing that, hey, our marriage is solid and that we love one another. If that's what, hey, that's fine with me because it is not worth worldly success to lose everything at home. So you're going to hear our guest today dive into that, Julia Barbaro. I'm so impressed with her and Gino. I've known them for a good while now, a number of years, and have just always thought so much of them personally and their family. But she's a mother of 6. And obviously wife of Gino Barbaro, who's also been on the show a few times. He is the entrepreneur and co-founder of Jake and Gino, which most of you know. But together with Gino, they host the Julia and Gino podcast, where they focus on raising a family and running a business. Julia is the author of The Canolas Exploded and A Gelato Blast, books for all ages encouraging responsibility, creativity, and decision-making. She's going to talk about those books, obviously, a little bit in the show, but I encourage you to look them up. I think books like that have helped me to bring up hard topics with my children. And so it encourages questions from them, right? Or allows me to be able to share things with them that I want them to know and educate them about, but in a way they can understand so much easier. So today she's going to break down many things about the support you need from your spouse when you're pursuing a business, right? And some major struggles that her and Gino had early on, and the decisions, big decisions that were made to make Jake and Gino what it is today that had to happen from the home, right? In between them two, and the communication that they lacked and how they accomplished that. Even how do they communicate with these things with the children? She's going to help us with that today. Julia, pleasure having you on this show. I'm honored. And, you and I have already talked about a couple of things, how our families have connected years ago in this industry. And it's so neat how things work out. The Lord does things. But your part in the business that you all have is so crucial, and it's not talked about very often. And when I speak often, I talk about my wife. I talk about how she supported me and how it wouldn't have happened without it. Right. It would not have happened. And so I love your part in this story, how you're helping people to think through these things, the family level, the children, the spouse. It's so important, and it's not focused on enough. But welcome to the show.
Thank you, Whitney. I just want to first thank you for inviting me on. And I want to create value for the listeners. And I just want you to hear me out a little bit. Like Whitney said, I have the other side to this story. A lot of you know my husband, Gino, and he's very successful in what he does, but there is a second part to it. And his struggle is we'll talk about it through the podcast. I definitely want to get into some of the details and the difficult moments, but it's there. And I just want to give value to your listeners.
Wow. Awesome. Well, I want us to just jump right in and I want, you do a share maybe a little bit about, I want us to talk about some of those struggles, right? And difficulties and how, your role in that is so crucial, right? And just the family component, the spouse, the support, all those things that, like I said, are not talked about. Let's just jump right in there. And maybe you can go back to some of those struggles or when you all were starting your business or some decisions that had to be made, how you all stayed on the same page and what that looks like with children. And, let's jump in.
Yeah, sure. When we're talking now, that one of the things that really stood out is when my husband, a lot of he had a restaurant and he struggled with it. And I would watch him. So here's the other side of the story. He would come home from the restaurant, dirty, smelling like garlic. And he would take off his chef clothes and he just looked defeated. He looked like he was done and he couldn't do it anymore. And this went on for a long time and I watched it. And so I became aware of, without talking, we had a really difficult communication. We didn't have the best of communication, and I'll get to that in a second. But I was very aware of where he was and I could see he needed a change, but I didn't know what that meant. And so when the day he came to me and said, what if we sell the restaurant? I moved to Florida and we pursue the real estate. I thought, holy cow, in my head, there's like a little window of time when you get the information and what words you speak. There's this little window of time that I think we take advantage of. And in that moment, it felt like 5 minutes that I was thinking, you want us to leave everyone and everything we know to go somewhere because you need a break from your life here. You know what I mean? And I was thinking, oh my gosh, how could we do that? And I looked at him and I saw the struggle that he was having. He needed a separation. He needed something different. And I just, the only word I came out was yes, of course. And I thought, holy cow, did I just say that? Is this what we're going to be doing? Because here's the thing. In the meantime, as he was doing the restaurant, what he was doing is he was trying to figure something else out. And that was real estate. And he didn't just come home from work and sit on the couch, watch TV, do, video games, whatever anyone does these days, go out drinking with the guys. He came home and educated himself. And I saw that with my own eyes. I saw him trying to get to a different part of his life, away from the restaurant and into something else. And here's my thought with the listeners out there. If you're trying to explain to your wife or get their support, are you putting in the effort and do they see it? A lot of times we just talk, hey, I'm doing all this work, but do they see it? And I saw it. And that's why it was more easier for me to say, yes, let's take it on, because it's scary. But I had trust in him because he was putting in the work and I saw it.
That's so important. I think about, I know lots of guys who do not have support, right? Or there's so much fear in taking a leap like this, right? It's so easy to get burdened by the fear and really, and just hold you back, right? And I just stress, man, if your spouse is not on the same page, it's going to be such a struggle, right? And it's probably not going to work because it's difficult getting a business started, right? And it's so time intensive. And so maybe how did he express that? Was this before he said, hey, why don't we move to Florida to do this thing? And that seemed like, oh my goodness, can we really do this? Was he already putting in that time ahead of time? Did you already see this happening? Like you saw, this is something, okay, he's going to be serious about this. It's something that he's definitely dedicated to. Yeah,
it was going on at the same time because he was struggling but he was doing real estate and he was meeting Jake at the same time. And that was all happening at the same time. I didn't meet Jake, by the way, until far into Jake and Gino, which is interesting. I didn't even know who he was. I knew the restaurant had a dish named after him. It was called Jake's Chicken. I'm like, who is this guy, Jake? That gets a dish named after him. But here's the thing. My husband he showed me, and this was before our communication, which I told you we were going to get to, and I guess we'll get to it now. He showed me that he was very cautious on who he did business with. Now, he made a lot of mistakes. He chose a lot of the wrong people, and he realized it after. But he was very cautious about who he went into business. In this case, it was Jake. He knew what his values were. He knew how his work ethic was. And I think that's really important. So I knew that. And so I trusted him making the decision. But when I look back, and I think I put a lot of trust in him because of that work. But what I could have done, and this is how we plan for the future in our future conversations or our future decisions, is we would look back and we say, man, I should have said, Gino, tell me why you want to, like, let's open up the communication. Like I said, our communication really stunk. I just watched him and I said, okay, let's go. But what he could have said to me is, Julia, can you trust me? You seem I'm putting the work in. And that's what we can ask our spouse now is, could you give me, I need your encouragement. We don't ask for our spouse's encouragement half the time. We just expect it. And they don't know. I didn't know how to. I didn't know what he needed from me because I never asked him. But now in our communication through life coaching and through, talking with a lot of people, I realized that I can actually ask for it. I could say, Gino, I need your support at home. I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed out. Here's my struggles. And he'll reciprocate. He'll give me his struggles as well. We forget that we can ask the person for that encouragement. And I think it opens the door to a really solid relationship.
Asking the question can go so far, right? And even just expressing that you care, that you notice, right? Those things. Right. It's interesting you mentioned, like overwhelmed at home, right? It can be overwhelming, this big leap and you just all the unknowns. And you obviously supported him and all this process. What about, communication is so key, crucial, right? In every relationship, and especially at home and husband and wife. Did you all develop any kind of communication cadence or like any, how did you all improve that? I would love like the listener and myself to improve this right at home. Even now, as entrepreneurs, man, we're pursuing big things, right? We're pushing. And it's, depending on your level of drive, I mean, it's hard to shut it off sometimes. Right. And then we don't even leave time for communicating, with the most important person in our life. How did you all improve that and develop a cadence? Well,
it's funny, Whitney, because a lot of times we don't communicate because we don't know how. And so when we don't know how to do something, we avoid it. And so my husband and I were married for 15 years, I think at the time. When he went to life coach school, he mentioned he wanted to do this life coach. Now, I'm going to be honest, I thought it was this cookie nonsense life coaching where, you think positively and everything will work out. And I just like, go ahead. But what happened was amazing because I had just had we had just had our fifth child and I was sitting there and I was exhausted and I was overwhelmed. And he must have done this course on listening because he came to the couch and he sat down next to me. And I just have it vivid in my head. He sat down on the couch and he looked at me and he looked into my eyes and he asked me these personal questions. He asked me one question. And as I was answering him, I was so uncomfortable. And I was uncomfortable because he was listening. And I was so uncomfortable. I said, Gino, is everything okay? Like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just listening. And I thought, holy cow, we've never done this before. In all the years that we've been together, when we listen to someone, half the time we're busy. We're doing something else. And especially as a mom, you're taking care of kids, you're cooking, you're straightening, you're doing things at the same time of communicating. We forget that we literally have to 100% focus on the person in front of us if we really want to listen, because we're used to talking all the time and no one's really listening like we should. That was the start of it. And that moment was, I think, the biggest breakthrough in our marriage because it was the first time I felt listened to and the first time he actually sat and watched me talk in a new way. We always have conversation, but this was different. And I thought, wow, this life coaching thing might be a good thing, So, and then it progressed from there. And sometime later, I noticed all the people he was helping. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. I actually want to learn this. And so when I went to school for it, it was like this awareness thing this is amazing. Because not only it's the listening part, it's the communication. How are we communicating with each other? And so now when I talk to Gino, I'm very clear on what I'm trying to get through. A lot of us women babble. It's just the reality. We go off emotion sometimes. We don't really make sense. And my husband can say, Julia, what's really going on? He can ask me the question. And I think that's part of the communication is the back and forth, the understanding of what the person is trying to get out. Because a lot of times we leave the conversation and a lot of times our husbands are confused. And so it doesn't go well. And that's the moment, guys, where you could say, do I have this right? Is this what you mean? Is this what you're feeling? we can communicate that back to the person and they could say yes or no. And if it's a no, we can clarify it. And then it goes into our reaction to what's being said. You know, my husband wants to come to me and tell me things, but if I'm going to overreact about everything he does, well, guess what? He's not going to come back. He's going to go to someone else and talk to them. So I have to be responsible on how I react to when he's trying to tell me something. Am I being aware of it? You know, there's many times he would come up. He's like, we just got another deal. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And I would go off and do what I had to do. Now, I didn't realize that he hated that. He felt like, you know, I didn't care because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what that meant because there wasn't that communication of, here's what it means. Let me sit down and show you. Because a lot of times, you know, being on the other side, I don't understand what it means to get another deal. Okay, I get it. You bought something, you know, eventually we'll make money off of it. But I want to share in his excitement, but I didn't know how.
You didn't know how that deal affected you and the kids.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it really. And I know that sounds ridiculous to a lot of you, but we really don't understand. You know, I needed him to show me, look, now we could do these things. Now we can help these people that we couldn't do before. And that was the biggest thing was when we moved to Florida, we were by ourselves. And it took me a few years into being here, which is only like 3 years ago, that he's like, listen, well, here's financial freedom. Here's what it means. Guess what? We can help your mom move down to Florida. We can help her with finding a place because we have the money to do it. We can fly the kids' friends down and take care of them for the 2 weeks. You know what I mean? And so for a second, I was like, oh, I understand now. So my husband had to make it that I understood. Not another real estate investor, but his wife who doesn't do real estate. I needed to understand it in my language. And it took a while for him to figure that out and me. But I'm just putting it out there that if your wife or your child or your parents or somebody doesn't understand the excitement behind what you're doing, explain it to them in their language so they could understand it. And then they could share in your excitement.
It's like painting the vision that he has in a way that you can and the kids can understand. Right. On that note, you know, I want you to be able to elaborate a little bit on like managing the kids during this time as well, right? I mean, you said you had 5 kids when you moved to Florida. I mean, it's like no small.
We had another one.
6, no small feat, right? Yes. I mean, planning to move, all this change. You know, kids that are already have friends and are established potentially in the community and church and all those things that are so important to us. And now it's like, okay, now we're going to move everyone. Speak to managing the kids during that time, maybe setting expectations for them, encouraging them, right? You know, how we're talking about him communicating with you. Well, you almost have to communicate with kids and as well, but maybe in a little different way too, right? Or painting that vision for them. How did you all do that? So maybe there wasn't massive fear. Maybe they were excited, but you know, how did you all do that?
It was a huge challenge. And I think every time we get into a situation like that, you know, when we mentioned it to the kids, it was devastating. And I want to be clear, it wasn't like, hey, we're moving to Florida. It was really a challenge on each one of them and each very differently because we have to remember that each of our children are so different. They handle things differently. We need to talk to them differently. They're not a one size. So you couldn't
just like sit everybody down and have one conversation. Everybody's ready to go, right?
It was not. It was really, there were surprises. There was my oldest was like, oh, that might be fun. And I thought, oh my gosh, you are the one that is connected with all the people here. But we did in a group say, listen, this is what we're going to be doing. But then I had to go separately to each one of them. And it was a challenge for years. It wasn't once we got down here, everything was fine. There's still, I mean, we've been here for 5 years and there's still tears once in a while that they miss what they used to have. And as a parent, we want to take care of them. We want to fix it, right? Our desire is to make it where nothing's wrong. Everything's happy. You know, it's always great and joyful at home. And what happens when we do that is we're just masking up what they're feeling. And I had to experience this and learn it. So I didn't know this ahead of time, but I had to realize that I was devastated too. And they needed to see that. They needed to see that their emotions and what they were feeling. Sometimes we try to avoid it. We try to avoid the pain. We try to avoid the fear. And so we pretend like we're okay. But it's okay because we have to be in that moment for a little while. We have to be devastated and painfully miss our family up north and just like our identity up there. And so I had to figure out over the years how to say, you know what, I'm upset too, and let them see the piece of me where it's difficult. But one of the things too is that when we're the parent, we're the leaders, right? We're guiding our children, and our communication between the spouses is super, super crucial. My husband and I had a lot of disagreements, a lot of arguments through the time. And a lot of us want to, hide in the other room so the kids don't see it. But it's good for them to see that. It's good for them to see that we disagree and we argue and then we make up and then we talk about it. Because otherwise they're going to grow up thinking, well, marriage is perfect. There's no arguments. Everything should be. And then they get into a marriage and they're like, wait a second, this is not what my parents had. They had the perfect marriage. And they're expecting it as well. But it comes back to the responsibility for me as the mom, to guide them as best I can and to say, it's okay to be upset. It's a challenge. It really is. And every decision we make affects everyone else in our life. When we decided to move, it affected not only our family, but everyone that we left.
Yeah.
And that's something that we forget.
we haven't even talked about that. The other people that were leaving, right? Julia, I always like to ask, how people like to give back. And so maybe you can share how you all like to give back, but also share about, the books you're writing and how you're helping in that way as well.
Well, giving back, I think goes back to giving to those who need help. And a lot of times we think of, the other side of the world. We got to go do a mission trip on, who knows where. But there's people in our community. There's people even in our own homes that need support. And, start with our children. Sometimes we're so focused on trying to help everyone else that we forget that the people in our house are suffering. And that's a lot of times what I have to notice is, okay, I'm trying to help all these people around. Am I focusing also on my children? Am I being there for them? And so, yes, I am. No, I'm not. And so I have to reevaluate very often. And then my husband as well. But then outside of that, sometimes it's the person that lives next door that just needs to be listened to. We think so big that we have to do this amazing thing in the world, but sometimes it's just a person at the grocery store that just wants to talk and talk and talk. Meanwhile, we're in a hurry to get out of there. But it's that acknowledgement of this person just needs to be heard. And that's really giving back. In my life, I can't go on to a mission trip somewhere else. But what I can do is go to the grocery store and hear the person bagging, tell me their life story. And I can ask them one question and they feel like you leave with they have a smile on their face. And that does make a difference. And I think we forget that. It doesn't have to be this great big thing. It can be something so tiny. But through that, I have these great ideas that I tell my husband. And every time I have this great idea, he does more work. So I try to balance my great ideas. I'm being half joking here. But one of them was a children's book. I said, you have a lot of great books. You have all this education for adults. And I said, we have kids. And we know a lot of people that have children. And what better way to show just decision-making, responsibility with a children's book, a fun, it's geared towards 7 to 10-year-olds. We have 2 books. It's The Cannolis Exploded and also The Gelato Blast. And it's basically something bad happens. And these 3 characters, we have Responsible Rhino, Creative Caterpillar, and Pity Party Pig. They have to decide what to do. And so all of them take different paths. Obviously, the responsible one, he gets educated, and he goes down that road. The Creative Caterpillar tries to create something different, like an entrepreneur. And then the Pity Party Pig feels sorry for himself for way too long. You know what I mean? And he makes really bad choices. And it's interesting because this is literally what I talk to everyone about, but we just put it in kid form because it's so important as parents, or even, we don't have to be parents to read it to children, grandparents, aunts, uncles, to open the conversation to children saying, hey, by the way, your decisions matter. Your decisions that you choose to take will affect your future. And so it's a great, there was even in the back, there's questions to ask and which I love because it's not just a book. It's a thought processing one, and then the second book, they have Mentor Moose. We have, who are you listening to? Because how important that is for children to know is that when we're trying to get advice from somebody, who are we listening to? Who are we asking? If if the kids are struggling with one, I don't know, with their mother, let's say, because that happens. Are you going to someone who has a really bad relationship with their mother? Or are you going to someone who respects their mother and has a great... So we have to think about, this is adults, who we're getting advice from. Because if we're getting advice from money, we're having a financial issue. Are we going to someone who has, solid foundation in finances, or are we going to someone who is in the same situation that we are? So that's something to talk about. And so this is just a kid's version of it.
Love
and
that.
You can, it's super fun. It's super fun.
That's amazing. And I can't stress that enough either, just how books like that can be so beneficial. It's hard to just have a conversation about those things, right? And your child understand or pick up, as we grow in business, we start to understand the value of mentors and who those people we surround ourselves with. But it's hard to tell your 7-year-old what that looks like, right?
Yes.
And oftentimes, a story like that can be so helpful, right?
Yes.
To just kind of open that conversation up and even to help you to even dumb it down a little bit. And I don't mean dumb, but, but really like simplify these terms so they understand.
And you know what, Whitney, it actually helps the parent because it helps us, even though we have the book, it helps us to say to the child, to the kids, hey, this is who I go to for help. Here's how I was responsible. Here's how I, felt sorry for myself for way too long. And so it opens that door to the connection of parent and child on where we are. Because we don't want to tell the kids everything in our life, but we want to be real at the same time. It's like a weird balancing.
It's been an amazing pleasure to have you on the show. I love your focus and in our business, right? Focusing on the spouse, helping the family component, the children, the supporting the spouse that's the entrepreneur. It is not talked about enough. There's not enough help around those things and just opening the entrepreneur's mind to what's happening at home, right? And I just appreciate you doing that. So grateful and really just being real about the struggles, the difficulties that you all have had, whether it's the move and the communication and the children and the new businesses and all what having a deal means or what it means to just sit and focus on your spouse and listen to show you care, so important. How can the listeners get in touch with you or learn more about you and your books?
Yeah. If you go to jakeandgino.com /coloring pages, there's information on there. There's even printout for the coloring pages, which is kind of cool. Amazon has the book, and I'll give you a link for a free PDF as well. And viewers can just download that and get the free PDF. And, I love when people send me their stories when they contact me. Contact me on email, juliabarbaro@gmail.com. I would love to get in touch with you.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the #1 resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.